So we're a little short on our group yet. We'll see a few more coming in. But while we're waiting, I want to tell everybody about the first time I ever met Rod Marr.
Oh God, was I
So
rude? Probably.
no, you're great.
Okay.
I was up at Bellingham. I was like in my first or second week at Bellingham, and there's some coaching assistant or something that was playing that was working for one of the NBA teams and was visiting at the Seahawks, or at the Sonics rather. Geez. And it was right when they had first come out with their rubber lens hood rules.
Oh
I don't know
yeah.
if you remember this, but I'm sitting on the baseline, and I noticed this PR looking guy, the guy that I got my credential from. He's walking the line and he's inspecting everybody, giving them the once over. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I'm not saying anything, being totally self-conscious. And just as he gets like 2 or 3 people away, this guy sitting next to me reaches over and grabs my camera out of my lap and drops a camera in my lap. And I look at him, and there's this, big smile on his face as the guy comes up and just gives me the one over and walks on by. And then Rod begins to explain, well, you got to have a lens hood or they won't let you shoot. And I didn't have any rubber lens hoods. So
That's right. I remember that. I do remember that. You didn't want anyone to lose their spot just because some player had cut their hand on a post remote like 2 weeks earlier. And so that's why they put the, yep.
So thanks for that. And thanks for coming to speak today.
Absolutely.
First of all, I'm glad you're all able to join us for the UPAA 2020 Digital Symposium. I want to thank my co-hosts, Jaron Wilkie, Nate Edwards, and Gabe Mayberry for helping out with this, and also thank the board for everything they've done to make this happen. And most importantly, here's our schedule for today. What we'll be listening to Rod first and follow up with Deanne this afternoon. First, our item of business on your profile, your Zoom profile, please list your first and last name if you want to win any of the door prizes that are being given out today. And there's some cool stuff. So they'll be picked by random from your name on your profile. So if you don't want the prize, by all means, stay as iPhone or computer 695. All right. We couldn't do it without our corporate partners. Yesterday, Nikon and Canon helped us out a huge amount by bringing in Peter and Dixie. Today we have Roberts, and actually we're going to have Roberts every day. John Scott is going to be on the call, and he's helping us with technical items. So if you have anything equipment related, lighting, software, those sort of things, throw that up on the chat, and John will jump in there and answer that. A quick aside about Roberts: when I was with Sporting News and on the road, all I had to do was call Jody Grober at Roberts, and he would help me tech edit anything. He would help me figure out what the problem was and fix it, even if he wasn't selling me something. And Roberts has always been that way. So if you don't know Roberts' camera, you need to check out Roberts' camera. All right. So now to Rod Marr. He's a good guy. He's a good friend and a great photographer. He started off photographing, I can't remember the name of the publication, but it was a small publication covering the Seahawks. And through doing that, got his job at the Seattle Times, where he shot a lot of stuff, but he worked his way up to be the beat photographer photographing the Seahawks there. And early on in social media, he created the Eye on the Hawks blog for the Seattle Times, and it was getting tens of thousands of hits. People were going there every week just to see what Rod had photographed for the Seahawks. He turned that into a huge well, I don't know about huge, but a full-time contract really with the Seahawks, where he's their guy. He's their photographer. He travels with them. They're his friend. I see him posting stuff where he's going out to dinner with coaches and with players. So with that, I want to turn the time over to award-winning photographer and great guy, Rod Marr.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Jay. Hi from Seattle. I know the weather wherever you guys are is nice and warm. We were just talking about it has not been over 70 degrees one day in June, and I know a lot of you guys are already in triple digits. I want to thank you all for being here. Like I got dressed, I showered, I shaved today, like quarantine life. Like I found a clean shirt and I actually ironed it. So I hope you guys appreciate this effort of this black Gap probably t-shirt. Anyway, thank you. And also thank you to Roberts for having me here. I really appreciate it. Like Jay says, Roberts is great. And I love Jody. I would never tell that to him to his face, but I love the guy with all my heart. And they solve problems. And that's, for me as a professional photographer, I'm on the road a lot. If I have problems, equipment issues, I can call Roberts and get the help I need. I also want to thank Nikon. Chris Bosworth is here. Same thing. Like I can't tell you the number of times I've called on my Nikon friends for help because I was too lazy to read the manual and then I had to kind of figure it out. So anyway, thank you so much. So I want this to be kind of open-ended for you guys. I've got some things I want to show you and some things I want to talk about, but the chat is open and Jay is going to feed me questions. And I really want to be able to answer as many questions as you guys have. And it can be about anything. I'm a sports photographer, but I shoot lots of other things. Obviously right now, there's not a lot of sports I can photograph. So doing lots of different kinds of work. The work in your group is exemplary. I'm fortunate enough to speak to a lot of groups and do a lot of teaching in my career. And I'm not going to lie, like I'm intimidated. Like I was intimidated last year when I went to Roberts and spoke for some of the members of your group, and I saw the work and I follow it and I look at the social and every single person in this group is really accomplished and really talented. And obviously you guys are super committed to what you're doing. You checked in here. Also, I want to take a lot of questions because I know yesterday you guys had Dixie, right? Then you had Peter Hurley, and today you have Deanne after me, right? So that's like the Rolling Stones, like U2, right? Like Taylor Swift, and then like you kind of fit me in the middle. So like I'm into that. But like I saw the lineup and I was intimidated.
You're our Paul Simon.
I'm the Ringo. Wait, who's the forgotten Beatle? All right. So I am going to now, and Zoom is a little bit awkward because, you know, when I want to share my screen, like I have to do this and then this. And you should be able to now see my logo.
Yeah, we're good.
All right. So yes, I like doing things in Keynote, but I find that being able to do them and doing them on Zoom and being able to use different things actually makes things more flexible. So if there's something you guys want to talk about, I've got lots of things prepared and ready, and we can kind of go lots of different ways. So the subject of my talk today, for lack of a better one, is really about finding the moments in our photography. We all have these jobs, and you guys work at universities, I work for a football team. We do the same thing a lot. We're at the same locations. We see a lot of the same people. So how do we make our photography different, and how do we make our photography special? Jay Drowns at the beginning was talking about a story from he and I back in the Sonics days. And the coach of the Sonics at that point was a guy named George Karl. And he always talked and he preached to his players about playing special basketball. And that stuck with me, being special. And I try to take that to my work every day. Like, what is special about this? Where find special moments. And it can be really hard when you're shooting the same thing and the same people in the same place every day. And that's a challenge. And I'm imagining that that's a challenge for a lot of you. Some of you work on really big campuses. Some of you work on small campuses, but you're shooting a lot of probably environmental portraits and some sports and some different things. And it can get repetitive. Like, let's be honest, within the group, right? Like it can be a little bit tough and can be challenging to be fresh. And so we want to talk about finding moments. The first moment is me. when I wanted to be the first Asian American basketball player in the NBA. They don't really let you in the NBA if you're 5'4" and you're wearing Coke bottle glasses and you have a shot that looks like that. Then I thought, well, I want to play football, and I ended up in the NFL working for the Seattle Seahawks. So that was cool, but really too small. I couldn't hit a curveball, but I had those dope bell-bottom jeans. Can you ever see my bell-bottom jeans? Those are dope. So I went to college, and like a lot of people, I didn't, I think actually having kids now, I've got a daughter and a son, and I'm going to make a broad generalization. Like we male men people, like we're slow. Like we don't get it. We don't really grow up, I think, until we're like 27 or 30. And it took me a lot longer. I think the girls mature and kind of get the idea faster. I was in college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Do I want to go to law school? Well, that's hard. I really wasn't into doing things that were hard when I was in college. And a family friend came up and said, you know, I was kind of floundering around, and they were photographers for the University of Washington and Seattle Pacific University. And they weren't, and they were sports photographers. And I had never really picked up a camera, and they were like, oh, you might really like this. Like you like sports. This is a way to be creative. And I think I took like one roll of film at an SPU basketball game and maybe got one frame in focus. And it was probably of like the layup line, like during pregame warmups. But, you know, like you saw in the movies, you took the picture and you put it in the enlarger and you put it in the tray, and we were fascinated. And I bet a lot of you became hooked the same way I did, just kind of the magic of photography and freezing time and then being able to make it permanent, for lack of a better word. So I ended up in college at the University of Washington Daily, and I found that I really, really liked sports photography. And much to the chagrin of my parents, who had hoped that, you know, I would find a better job at some point, or career, or calling. And so I did a lot of work at the University of Washington Daily, and I didn't really pick up photography until my last year of college, but I fell hard and I fell deep into it. And this is a picture, and I love this picture because it's kind of action and kind of reaction. And this was before taunting was really even cool. My daughter's a senior at Arizona State, so we have a lot of fun with this picture. I like to show it as often as I can. And then I worked for a little magazine called Inside the Seahawks. And there are those of you, and I know there's a lot of people kind of in the Midwest in this group. Back in the day, there were these little fan newspapers that covered the local NFL teams. And really, for you young kids that are watching, this was the equivalent of a printed blog. So run by fans, written by fans, kind of the fan point of view, just the way every college, pro, whatever sport has a blog or multiple blogs. This was essentially a blog. My first boss, though, was Kenny Easley, who was an All-American at UCLA and then an All-Pro for the Seahawks. And now he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And so this was my first job, like out of college. I got this internship. I became their photographer. And right out of college, I was really lucky that I was getting to shoot pro sports. And that began kind of how my little accident of a career happened, is that I was working for Inside the Seahawks. And then from there, I got mentored by a fabulous photographer, human being named Harley Soltis. And Harley was the sports photographer at the Seattle Times. He had worked in Topeka and at the Eugene Register Guard. He comes out of the Rich Clarkson tree of photographers. In sports, we talk about coaching trees. So you have a famous coach like Bill Belichick of the Patriots, and he has spawned a number of assistants who've now become head coaches. Rich Clarkson was, if you don't know who he is, and I assume most of us do because we work for UPAA or we're in UPAA, is that UPPA, I can say that, right? Rich Clarkson really redefined sports photography, or even not even redefined, he defined it. He was the one who found ways to document teams and take fans behind the scenes. And that's something I've always followed. And I learned that from a guy named Harley back when I was at the Seattle Times. And it's amazing that I could even carry cameras with all the product in my hair in this photo. Like, take a look at that, right? Like, especially on a computer screen, whoo, it's a lot. So at the Seattle Times, I was an intern. And even when I was out photographing feature photos, I was somehow finding a way to put sports in it. And being the young kid on the staff, I was working nights. So I was shooting sports, I was shooting shows, I was shooting speeches, what I call the S assignments. This is actually a manual focus, I'm that old, photo from the Kingdom. And this is when I really started to understand that I could go find peak action and that I could make it, that I could use sports photography as a way to communicate. And this is Edgar Martinez back when he was a rookie. Look how skinny he is. And this is him at the end of his career in ~95, again at the Kingdom. This is Ichiro being introduced at the opening of the baseball season at Safeco Field. And I'm just looking always for different moments. If you follow my Instagram, which is @RodMarPhoto, and we'll show that later, in my tagline, I write, I'm trying to make one great picture today. I'm not trying to make a bazillion great pictures every day. I want to make one. And I find that if I focus on making one, I end up being able to concentrate better and longer throughout. This is a portrait of Ricky, last name Waters. Get it? Oh, the visual puns in newspaper photography. Let me tell you, they never stop. Shawn, Kemp, and Gary Payton during the heyday of the NBA in Seattle, '95, '96. Jay Drowns was in Seattle at that point. This is a remote photo of Shawn Kemp. I like showing this photo because of the planning that it took to put a backboard remote up. I don't know if any of you have experimented with backboard remotes, but basically you super clamp that bad boy with a wide angle against the backboard, and you use some blackout foil to kill out the reflections. I also had a post remote, meaning a remote on the post that actually holds the basket up. And I had two remotes, and this dunk was coming, and I tried to hit the post remote, and I accidentally hit the backboard remote. And so I'd like to tell you that for all the preparation I did, this is just another happy accident in my career.
Hey, Rod, maybe you can talk a little bit about the planning that goes into this, the collaboration between writers and designers, both for like the Ricky Waters, the portrait.
Yeah, for sure. So with the Ricky Waters, we were talking about, we did a series of portraits of the Seahawks, and doing kind of different things, kind of just creative ways to get them off the field. And so obviously Ricky Waters was a visual pun. This is a walk-through fountain at Westlake Park in Seattle. And I saw the fountain, and I had this idea, if we brought the umbrella and we had him stand under, and we could get the water just right and fill, there's some fill light coming in. And this was shot on a Hasselblad, so we didn't have a lot of takes at it. What I learned from, and so we had a lot of different concepts. So one, we had Warren Moon, who was the quarterback then, actually playing with a bunch of kids in the park, and they're all, they all came up to his waist, but he was in full uniform. He's like in a full NFL uniform and helmet, and there's all these kids in like cutoffs and t-shirts, and he's playing touch football in the park. We put Cortez Kennedy, a 325-pound defensive lineman. We put him into a bathtub, bubble bath full of little rubber ducks. So we just tried to kind of be different, be creative, kind of show a different side of people. What I learned from this shoot was that you have to scout. And I didn't know. I was like, oh yeah, there's water, umbrella. The force of this water was so incredible. He could barely hold the umbrella into the water. You can see he's using two hands to hold it. And I think we maybe got 3 frames of this before it was just like, I hope we got one. And this is pre-digital, and we're shooting on, like I said, 2.25 film on a Hasselblad. So we had no idea whether we got it. Like, I was pretty sure it was in focus, you know, at f11, but like how many frames we got, it really wasn't more than 6 or 8. The water was way too powerful because I hadn't done my homework and I hadn't scouted it. When you're talking about working with reporters, and I know a lot of you do that, I was really active in, reporters were my friends. And I think like a reporter more than a photographer. And where that's good is communicating with writers. Where that's bad is sometimes my creativity fails me in that I'm trying to tell a story so badly that I'm not making a compelling image. And I feel like that's been a challenge for me throughout my whole career. So this is Kevin Durant, who was, oh, did I lose you? I put my, can you guys see the show again? Give me a thumbs up. Where are we?
Yep, we're good.
All right. So I'm going to apologize for that dreaded glitch because I put my phone on silent and do not disturb, and it really only will allow the important calls to go through, right? Because I didn't want this to happen. And then my mom just called me. So we got knocked off of the stream. So I apologize, or we got knocked out of the slideshow. I didn't know that was going to happen. Again, Zoom, like a whole new world, right? So Kevin Durant, and I wanted to have him leaping over the Space Needle. And at Cary Park in Seattle, if you've ever been to Seattle, there's a famous viewpoint called Cary Park. And I thought if I could get him jumping over Space Needle, it'd be really cool. So again, this is lit, as you can see. He wasn't getting enough height, so I actually had him stand on like a 3-foot, that ledge is probably 3 feet, that keeps people from falling down the hill. And he had to jump off the ledge, face into the camera, and get the pose just right. And luckily, he didn't have an agent, and the Sonics were too lazy in their last year in Seattle to send a PR person, because they would have never let Kevin Durant jump off of a 3-foot ledge, not knowing where the landing point was for a photo like this. And so I really like this photo. And this was probably the early days of the internet, right? It wasn't when you just, everyone commented, right? But enough people commented that as soon as this photo got published, people were like, well, he looks like an amputee because I've stumped his left leg, right? But I could only ask him to jump so many times. And then people also thought it was Photoshop, that we had shot it in his studio and pasted him into the background. And after that, again, right, like what did you learn? Like, Rod, you could have shot this in a studio and pasted it in the background and saved everybody a lot of time and trouble. This is Edgar Martinez at the end of his career. Again, it's his last game as a Mariner, last game as a professional baseball player. And I'm working really hard here to find a moment that tells a story, right? So at a Seahawks game, I might shoot 35 to 4,500 frames, but I'm looking for one. And this one kind of tells the story of a final game. The fans, the line of hands coming in at left, everybody wanting a piece of Edgar. And he, with that great smile and thoughtful enough to take his hat off to acknowledge the fans. And so that photo works. This photo is not from last week in Seattle. This photo is from the WTO riots. And coincidentally, ironically, the protests are going on in the very same street that I took this photo, which is Pine Street in Seattle on Capitol Hill. The police were trying to defend the East Precinct, and the protesters were approaching, and the tear gas came, and it was at night, and I'd been out for probably 14 hours on the street at that point, and this happened. I was able to make this photo, and I brought it back to my editor, who loved it, but couldn't resist getting a dig in. He said, even when we send you to shoot news, you come back with a sports photo, because this essentially is soccer. And so it's interesting for me to be back covering protests back in that same area and looking at that spot, remembering that I took this photo. so very long ago. And people ask me in Seattle all the time, like, do the recent protests, are they as bad as WTO? And there's more people involved now, and the protests are much more peaceful. And WTO was very violent and things like this, which is just a makeshift bonfire in a major intersection downtown. You can see the Westin Hotel right behind there. And so, you know, it was violent and it was dangerous, and I was young and stupid, so I loved it. I have a very different kind of view towards putting myself in the middle of riots now. So, you know, I worked at Seattle Times back in the day when newspapers were flourishing and they didn't have to run ads and they could give this much space to a photo. And so I was really fortunate. I was working with lots of different writers. I had great mentors. I was learning, and it was such the best way to learn because I got to shoot all kinds of things, just the way you guys do at your colleges and universities. So I took a buyout, 10 years ago. Newspapers were shrinking and staffs were shrinking and layoffs were coming and buyouts were coming. And I took a buyout from the Seattle Times, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I wanted to be a photographer still. I figured I'd be a commercial photographer. Didn't know, like, would it be lit portraits? Would it be weddings? I really wasn't sure. And I was really lucky that, again, my tie with the Seattle Seahawks continued, in that they called and asked if I wanted to work with them. And it didn't take me very long to say yes. And so now I'm the team photographer for the Seattle Seahawks. And our head coach, Pete Carroll, comes from again, we're going to go back to that term, coaching tree, which is from Bill Walsh, who used to coach the 49ers. And Bill Walsh worked famously for decades with a photographer named Michael Zagaris. And if you don't know Michael Zagaris's work, you should look it up. Michael Zagaris is a rock and roll and music and sports photographer out of the Bay Area. He's in his 70s. He has photographed in the locker room with Joe Montana and backstage with the Rolling Stones. This guy's a living legend. And so Pete came from working with Bill Walsh, and so he was always comfortable with the idea of cameras being everywhere. And Pete has one rule for the Seahawks, which is protect the team. And Pete once said to me, he's like, your job, Rod, is I want you to share with our fans all the things we do in the places they can't go. Right. And so I think in comedy, they call these callbacks. And that was a callback to me from Fred Nelson, a photo editor at the Seattle Times, who said one of the most important things you can do, Rod, is take your readers where they can't go. And now I had a new boss in Pete Carroll saying, take our fans where they can't go. And so this is in the tunnel before the team is getting announced to come out for pregame introductions. And there's lasers in the tunnel, and fans really can't see in there. And there's a video camera, and I'm waiting for DK Metcalf, who's a rookie, to get announced for his first game as a starter. And so the light's hitting just right. The smoke isn't too bad. I'm able to make a frame. And so what I do as a team photographer is, I think, a lot of what you guys do in your jobs. Is I'm working for one client. I'm trying to represent it in the best and yet most honest and genuine way I can. So if Pete Carroll tells me that I'm the eyes for the fans, then I take that very seriously. And I was thinking about, if I was a fan, what would I want to see, right? The same way you guys are always thinking, if I'm a reader of the university magazine, like, how do I want to see this? Or I'm an alumni, how do I want to see and remember my higher education? And so I put a lot of work into kind of finding these behind the scenes moments to share with our fans. And it's interesting that these get so much more traction socially, because these are things they can't see on TV. That was Russell Wilson. Yep.
We got a question from Courtney. She's asking, do you do all of your own editing or work with the team?
That's a great question. It depends. If I'm on the road, I'm a one-man band, so I've got to do everything. which workflow wise is very demanding on the road, because that means I have to be able to download two cards at halftime, and halftime in the NFL is only 12 minutes. So if you take 2 minutes to get the team in, 2 minutes to get the team out, right, that only leaves you 8 minutes to download two cards that are pretty full of raw and JPEG images. I have transmitters that I can connect to a Nikon D5, which has an Ethernet port. And so I'm constantly sending select photos during the game. I'm not sending the whole take, the bandwidth wouldn't work, but I can send small JPEGs out of that D5 right to our, it gets uploaded to Photo Shelter. And then our social team can see those photos right away. So if Tyler Lockett scores a touchdown, I can hit two buttons on the camera and it will upload a JPEG, and our social team can then grab it, put it into, if they've got like a pre-made frame or whatever, update the score, and we can have it on all our social channels literally within less than 3 or 4 minutes. So it's amazing technology. At home, I do have a team. I have an amazing photo editor. Her name is Jenny Buchanan, and she's a shooter and an editor. And I'm lucky in that this is someone that I got to mentor. And so for better or for worse, she sees like me, and I trust her completely. And she has to look through, like I said, 35 to 4,500 crap frames of mine on a Sunday and find the good ones. And she's quick to text me, hey, you're a little bit underexposed, or you're a little bit overexposed, or she'll hear something on TV because she's in the press room and she'll say, oh, by the way, did you know this and this and this? And then I can go find that. So she's an amazing teammate and wonderful to work with, and a great photographer. If she chose to shoot for one of the wire services instead of edit for me, she would be one of the top 5 photographers on the field easily at any Seahawks game that I'm at.
Yeah,
so yes, I work with, go ahead.
So I was just gonna say, Jenny was an amazing photographer to work with. She was my intern for 6 months back in Indiana.
Yeah, that's right. She did work in Indiana. Yeah, she's incredible. And then the most fun thing is I've got film runners, we have card runners, film runners. Wow, I dated myself. I can see all you older people out there nodding. Like, you remember throwing the film into the envelope, right? Making sure the leader was out, because if the leader wasn't out, then you were gonna get yelled at by the photo editor. Or I'm sorry, the lab tech. There were lab techs back in the day. They weren't Digitex kids. They were lab techs. They were old, crusty, usually men who spent their day in chemicals yelling at prima donna photographers like myself for not doing something right. So yeah, Jenny, my staff is amazing, the staff that I get to work with. And the coolest thing is every Sunday we go out for dinner after the Seahawks game. So that's going to be the one thing that I miss a lot, depending on what happens this fall. So,
before you jump ahead, sorry, we got a bunch of questions that just came in.
Sure.
You don't
Let's
mind?
go.
Let's see. First one would be, how many images from a shoot do you usually save permanently?
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of the worst part of the job for me, is going back through those 4,500 even after Jenny's edit, because she'll tag photos, but then I'll go through and tag everything I want to keep. And that's usually about anywhere between 900 to 1,200 from a game, which means I'm legit deleting 2,000 RAWs, which just scares people to death. They're like, how can you do that? Like, what if it's a valuable frame? Trust me, like, it's not a valuable frame. If I've gotten rid of it, like, it's out of focus. It's got motion blur, it's got someone in the way, it's got ref butt, it's got any number of things. I mean, that's and sometimes I'm shooting just to set something up, right? Can we talk about that? Like, sometimes I'm looking for a photo, it might be in the locker room, and I'm going to show you some photos of that later, but I'll be shooting to kind of find my way to an image, and I'll explain that. Next question. I'm going to kind of show pictures while we answer these questions. You don't have to stare at the same photo all the time.
That works. The next question from Jaron is, tell us about the adjustments that you're making with the team under COVID. Are you shooting the players right now, or what's the plan come fall football?
I don't know the plan. No one really knows the plan. I think the NFL probably, and I don't speak for the NFL or the Seahawks. I need to make that clear, especially since we're being recorded. I don't know anything more than anything else than anyone else does, just by reading and watching media. The players aren't here for their off-season workouts. They're doing those virtually. They have team meetings virtually, just the way we're having a meeting right now. And so they're going over, every team is doing it virtually. So players have computers and iPads, and they've been sent playbooks, I imagine, and they're kind of going over different schemes. But we have no access to the players right now. They're not here. And I wouldn't assume players would show up until training camp, which would be end of July. And that's if conditions allow.
Have you considered getting in touch with some of those players that you have a close relationship with and say, hey, can I come and COVID safely visit your house and photograph you going through your playbook?
Right, that's a great question. I've been in touch with a lot of players. Some of them are here, some of them want to be photographed. Washington is very strict on its protocols right now. Like, we're in stage 1.5 out of 4 in King County, which is where Seattle and Renton is located. And only in the last week or two have things really opened up. And I know players are training at a facility in Bellevue, and we've kind of talked about that. If I were to do that, it would be, as a contractor, it would be photographs for them that they can share on their own channels. I'm not sure what the rules are right now within the NFL and within teams about employees being in physical contact or in the same space with players. So I haven't really looked into that, but there's not a lot that they're doing right now other than just conditioning. There's not a lot of football going on, but I assume that's going to change as we move towards the end of July.
Cool, thank you. Next question is talking about your equipment. Come from Jason. What's your equipment that you carry? You got 3, 4, 5 cameras that you're toting around?
Yeah. I mean, I have the luxury of having an assistant, so I can carry lots of cameras. On the road, I'm very simple. I carry a Nikon D5. It'll be a D6 this fall. Nikon D5 with a 600 millimeter f4 lens, and another Nikon D5 with the 180 to 400 millimeter f4 zoom. And then I have a wide angle 24 to 70 around my neck. And so I use those during games. Pre-game, and then we'll also have another camera with the 14 to 30 millimeter f4, and we have that on the mirrorless. And 90% of all the work I'm doing right now is mirrorless. I really love it. The Nikon Z series is amazing. I shoot the Nikon Z7 and the Nikon Z6, and it's really great for everyday work and for the behind the scenes work. And I can go silent shutter in the locker room. The camera's just smaller. You can see your exposure kind of right away, so you're never really guessing. And I even shoot action with it. I shot all of our off-season stuff and all of training camp practices. I shoot every practice with the mirrorless. It's just easier and lighter. And as you get older, right? Like, yeah, Glenn's got a thumbs up, because as you get older, like, your back starts to hurt. You got to kind of take care of yourself a little bit more than when you're a young buck and you could go, play 3 softball games on a Saturday, play golf on a Sunday, and shoot a basketball game that night and be hunched over on your back. So my equipment is everything between the 14 to 30 wide angle zoom all the way up to the 600 millimeter. And so 3 cameras on the road. We might have 5 cameras at home, and we might have remote cameras at home where we're using remotes to photograph really just kind of player intro stuff. Can't really use a remote in football other than that. When I shoot baseball, I have multiple remotes. Basketball, different remotes. But for football, it's really, I actually looked in Lightroom because you can sort by lens, and it's like 60-40 between the 600 and the 100 to 80. And I used to shoot a lot more with the 180 to 400. Did I say that right? 180 to 400. And now I find I shoot a lot more with the 6. Like I like that tighter, cleaner look.
Thank you. Next question. In terms of candid versus posed, mostly I'm assuming they're completely candid photos. Do you ever pose a situation?
Yeah, you know, as much as I like to, I don't. Like, there are only 16 regular season games in the NFL. Like every game means so much, and this is their office, and I'm there just to document that. So I really, all of these moments that you're seeing behind the scenes are unposed, and it's me just, and I'm not standing there for 10 minutes at a time taking a bunch of pictures, right? Like if I see Tyler Lockett sitting here, like I kind of know, I can look at the scene. I might be leaning against the wall, another part of the locker room. I see it and I kind of know, and I'll check my exposure before I get there, and I'll have the right lens, and I'll go and I'll take 1 or 2 or 3 quick photos, and then I'm out of there. Like I'm never moving fast. I'm never, you know, I'm never in a hurry. I'm really trying to blend in, because the locker room really is a sacred space for them. And there's so much preparation that they have to do. And I really want to stay kind of out of the way. And this is halftime at a game. So all of these little moments are, I've sized it up before I've shot it, right? I pictured it. I know what lens I want to use. I'll check the exposure, aiming at the ground, and then I'll find it. So even I couldn't post a photo of Pete Carroll at 60 plus years of age climbing on top of lockers to talk to players. There are photos that are posed occasionally, but they're the ones that the players want. And it's usually we're on our way to an airplane or a bus or a dead part in practice, and they want to pose, and they want to, you know, they want it for the gram. Everybody wants everything for the gram. So these photos I'm showing you right now, this is what the off-season program would look like if we were having an off-season program. And that starts in mid-April and goes through June. It's a lot of conditioning. Next question, Jay.
So this one's coming in from Dominic. He's a graduate from Boise State University and was a student photographer there at the university. He wants to know about the pathway to being a team photographer for a professional team.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. It's there aren't very many jobs, but there are a lot of opportunities. Especially, I think there are actually more opportunities now than there were 5 years ago, just because of the rise of social media and the increased use of video. So if you can do stills and DSLR video, especially if you're handy, you know, using a mirrorless, and you can shoot and edit and deliver multiple streams of content, meaning stills and video, I think that that increases your chances. And what you want is to be able to work in the pros. I think you really have to be able to have a personality where you can lay low. Like I'm an outgoing person, but when I'm at work, I lay low. And so you have to understand, like always when you're a photographer, who's your client, right? Like what's the audience, who's the client, how do I behave? And so you really have to keep that in mind, and then being able to deliver on multiple streams. And here's the other thing, because of social, the Major League Baseball and the NFL have their own social media correspondents, meaning they have their own people shooting content and uploading it immediately for their social channels. And that didn't happen 5 years ago. And it certainly didn't happen in the days of film. So I'm able to deliver my photos almost instantly, as I explained, back to the Seahawks. And in the last 4 years, the NFL has had their own digital correspondents, and they're always young people out of college. So that I think, I don't know, it's like LCC, so licensed content creator? I'm not sure, but the NFL has them. And so does Major League Baseball. And so when those seasons start up again, those are great opportunities to kind of get in there and start working in sports. And then the other thing about being a team photographer is you have to be able to do lots of different things. It's not just the action. It's not just the documenting. I have to be able to shoot headshots, and I have to be able to shoot portraits and a team photo, and I have to be able to do lit stuff, and I have to do advertising stuff. And so the more well-rounded you are, the better. Because let's face it, like, I'm a sports photographer, but sports photography, a lot of people can do. And that's thanks to digital and autofocus. Back when I was growing up, autofocus really, if you could manual focus before autofocus, like, that really could get you a job. If you are a monster at manually focusing a camera and getting action photos, then you could get a job. The difference is with autofocus is back in manual focus days, I think people were either a D, if we were grading people on a curve, or grades, right? Letter grades, like, you were a D or you were an A. You could do it or you could not. Now, anyone can go to Costco and get a camera that autofocuses with a long enough lens and go to a baseball game and get photos of the pitcher and the hitter and know when a double play is coming. So what really can make you special is what's going to separate you, because there are a lot of photographers who can shoot basic action. So if you want to be a team photographer, you have to find an extra dimension to that, find ways to make your photo special, but you also have to be able to do all of the things. And the other thing is you have to be a great teammate, because I not only work with the football players and coaches and trainers and equipment staff, but I also work with ticketing and marketing and advertising and corporate partners and community outreach. So you have a number of different clients all within under one umbrella. And I know I'm kind of preaching the choir, because you guys all work for universities and you have a bunch of different constituencies that you answer to or that you have to photograph, but that's definitely a skill.
Yeah, one comment that just came through is Rod, exclamation mark, Rod is a university photographer.
Yeah, I am a university photographer. I've got a campus. The Virginia Mason Athletic Center is my campus. I photograph, you saw, there was just a classroom photo, I believe, right? Thing that people don't understand about pro football players is they might spend an hour and a half on the practice field, but they're going to spend 6 hours at desks in meetings. And so it literally becomes its own campus. It's got a cafeteria, and it's got classrooms, and it has teachers, and it has students.
Talking about some of that access, there's a few questions about your access. You talked about going into the locker room, but also there's the bench. The bench area in NFL is pretty sacrosanct, and unless you're part of the team, you don't get to get in there. If you can talk a little bit about your access to the bench, as well as talk about some moments either in the bench or in the locker room, moments that may have been lost or missed because somebody noticed Rod was there and it changed the moment.
Okay. First of all, I want to talk about this photo real quick, just because these are some draft photos from last year, because this year the draft was virtual, and my part of documenting the draft was editing photos someone was taking on an iPhone and uploading to our photo shelter, and I was editing them and cleaning them out and cleaning them up and uploading them back for social. So it was a very different experience due to COVID. So repeat the question one more time for me. It was talking about
your access, some of the images that you get
that's right.
From the bench, as well as images that you missed because they noticed that you were there.
They always notice that I'm there. The players these days are so conscious of cameras, and they are so they're so used to it, right? And they've all grown up with imagery, and they've all grown up with their own image because they grew up with cell phones, right? All they do is take pictures of themselves. And so when they're not taking pictures of themselves, they want me to take pictures of them. So they're always aware. There are moments when you either get a gut feeling like I shouldn't take this, or I take one and scoot, or someone will give me a look like not right now. And it's never rude. It's just, they'll just give me a look and I'll know. Or even if they give me an accidental look, I'll bail, because I don't want to risk that. Like, no photo's worth at least for my job, there's no photo that I need to take that's so important. And I've taken some really tough photographs. We lost the Super Bowl on almost the final play back in whatever year that was. I've wiped it from my memory. If you're Patriots fans, you guys remember out there, I can see you cheering. But I knew I had to take the hard pictures, and I knew that my job, a little bit like what Pete Souza did with Barack Obama, right? Like you have to document it. It's part of the team's history. And so, you know, I did take some pictures in the locker room. I took like 3 pictures in the locker room after that loss. And they knew I was taking pictures. I'm sure they could, this was before silent shutter, they could hear the shutter. The shutter sounded like a gunshot to me, but no one ever said anything. They just expected that it was part of the deal. But I will never, ever kind of risk getting in the way or my access to make a picture. And the sidelines, I observed so much more with the locker room and the sideline than I actually shoot. So it's really kind of, we talk about staying in your lane, right? So I know what my lane is. My lane is not to be in the middle of everything when I shouldn't be. So I understand when there's a teaching moment between a coach and a player, I can shoot that long. I can shoot that with a 70 to 200, right? I don't have to get up all in their faces. And there are private moments, like you've seen. I've shown pictures of team prayers and things. I'm taking 1 or 2 photos, and I'm getting out of the way. So, to me, the bottom line on that is there's no photo really worth jeopardizing anything. It's really, sports are about team first and winning first. And so I try and keep that in mind at all times. This picture here is interesting. Those of you who are old enough to have played football back in the day, you just took whatever helmet was given to you and you hope it fit and that your head didn't slide around in it. Now they use iPads to document and scan a player's head and then custom fit the helmets to them. Wild.
So Rod,
oh, and by the way, these 2 guys are rookies, and so they were like, they couldn't say anything when I was taking their photos of them looking silly. So they were rookies. They didn't know any better. They didn't tell me that. They'd be like, Rod, stop. And usually if a player tells me to stop, it's like they're playing because they really all want their photos taken all the time. Sorry, Jay, go ahead.
it actually goes right in with what you're talking about. Are there, Jason Haley was asking, is there ever a time where the player comes back and says, hey, take that photo down, or don't take, you know?
No, I've never really, I've been lucky. I've never really had a player say, you know, don't post that photo. But I do get, after every game, my phone will blow up with texts from players asking for photos for their Instagram, all the time. That's kind of a constant now, is after every game, we just try and send them out. It's gotten to be so much volume now that I think for the upcoming season, we'll have somebody at the Seahawks dedicated to sending photos to players, because I literally can't eat dinner on a Sunday because my phone is just players wanting photos. But no, I've never really had a player say, can you take that down? I did once have a soccer player not like a photo because he thought it made him look effeminate. He came from a culture that was not American and where masculinity is very, very valued. And so I had to understand where he was coming from culturally. And so that's kind of the only time I can remember. This is Russell Wilson. He makes weekly visits to Children's Hospital to visit with patients. And this is him with a Make-A-Wish kid. So our players do a lot of outreach types of things. And so I do document that. And this is a player proposing to his girlfriend. So I get a lot of this, right? Hey, you know, I'm proposing to my girlfriend. It's going to be on the field. Can you shoot it for me? Or I just did a gender reveal for a player like 3 weeks ago, where he wanted video and he didn't know how to do it. And could you come help me do this, etc.
So it's obvious that you've created some great personal relationships with these players. Nate Edwards is asking, how have you appropriately created a professional relationship with the players and coaches to gain their trust? How do you get to this point?
The first and foremost thing, I'm around them all the time. So they're used to me. I'm around them. And I grew up in sports. I played sports. I've been a basketball official, high school and college for over 20 years. I'm very comfortable within the setting of sports. And so I feel like I know how to talk to players, when to talk to players. But the other thing is they trust me because they know I'm not going to embarrass them. I will never embarrass the player. But I also understand when it's their time and when it's kind of my time, right? So if I'm doing a studio shoot, like that's my time. Like you're here, I need, I'm going to be pretty directive of you, both to save my time and energy, but also to save your time. So with Russell Wilson, we're doing a shoot for whoever it might be, NBC Sports, Sunday Night Football, Sports Illustrated, ESPN. Like he will talk first about what I'm looking for, and then he will deliver because we've already communicated kind of what we want to do. So he kind of knows the poses and he'll just run through them and we can do it pretty automatically. And then the other thing about rapport with players is understanding what we call time scoring situation, right? Like life can be boiled down to another George Carlism, right? Time score situation. Like, what's the time? What's the score? What's the situation? So if a player's just lost the game, or maybe he dropped what would have been the winning touchdown, like time score situation, that's not the time for me to put a wide angle in his face. Like I'm not working for the newspaper. I'm not working for the wires. So I'm always out to kind of protect them, but I'm around them a lot. And a lot of the times I'm not taking photos. So they're used to seeing me, and that really kind of helps the rapport. And I know that's harder for you guys because you guys are kind of dropping in and dropping out. And so rapport can be harder, and there's really no substitute. Like you can't recreate that kind of rapport. Like I'm on the plane with them, I'm on the bus, I'm practice field. Like, I mean, that a lot of that's going to change this fall because of health protocols. But in the past, that rapport comes from them seeing me. And then the other thing is the older players know you and you have a relationship with them. So when the rookies come in, they're like, oh, I can trust this guy because Bobby Wagner trusts him or Russell Wilson trusts him. So, and the last part of that, and a very important part, is the culture of where you are. And so some head coaches don't want photographers around at all, right? Some general managers don't want photographers or social media or cameras around at all. I'm lucky that I have a coach and a general manager who not only understand the importance of what I'm doing, but they create a culture where everybody treats everyone else like part of the team. Every player and every coach on our team treats everyone that works in our building and our stadium like they are part of the team. So our general manager will walk through CenturyLink Field on a Sunday and he will dap up, knuckle up, shake hands with every person who makes eye contact with him, be it an usher or a security guard or a kid picking up towels. And after we win a game, everyone's congratulating everyone, including the equipment kids, including me. Russell Wilson, when he's waiting at the locker room for players to come in after game, he's congratulating them. And I'm trying to hustle in to get photos of it. He'll slap me and say, hey, good win. And that's to everybody. And so that rapport doesn't just start with me. It starts with the culture that's been created.
Wow, thank you. That was a great response.
Questions?
Matt Kishore is asking a question. Does Rod feel extraordinary sports photos will still get noticed? And if so, how? And this stems from some comments in the chat where they're talking about how anybody with a pulse and autofocus can make a sports action photo. He's wanting to know about that next level of photography. Does it will get noticed, and if so, how?
Okay, that's a great question. Hi, Matt. How are you? Matt does great work. By the way, this is a posed photo, right? Like we're leaving the buses, getting on an airplane, and these guys like love their outfits and they plan their outfits, and so they want this photo. I shoot this photo of these guys every road trip. And so I'm going to flip through some road trip photos while I'm answering Matt's question. So the question was, how can we make, and do I think incredible sports photos will still stand out? I believe that while the volume of photos that are out there has increased, so has people's visual sophistication. Does that make sense? So there's way more photos out there, but it's also made the viewer a more savvy customer. I think viewers understand special pictures because they're inundated with average pictures all the time. So I think if you're making spectacular photos, they're still going to get noticed because they're going to stand out from just a constant influx of pretty basic average photography. So I'm a great believer, if I make special pictures, they will get noticed, and it's been proven out. If there's a photo I think is special and I post it on my Instagram, it gets much better response than an average photo.
So next question, this is another way you're like the university photographer. You're going into the same locations, same sort of situation day in, day out. How do you keep it interesting? How do you keep your creativity flowing?
Great question. This is getting back to culture here, and Pete Carroll says you don't work football, you play football. And so we try and keep it fun, and I try and apply that same philosophy to my photography, right? Like, how do I challenge myself, right? I'm looking at the same thing, and I'm very conscious because I do a photo blog for the Seahawks called Eye on the Hawks every week, and I have to be careful that I don't show the same situation from the same angle with the same lens week in, week out, right? Because we might play 3 straight home games in a row, and if I shoot the same picture in the locker room 3 weeks in a row, then that's stale. It's not interesting to my viewer, and most of all, it's not interesting to me. So does that kind of answer that question? I'm always trying to challenge myself, because like really for all of our careers, it's fighting staleness. Like I've been here 10 years now, and some of you have been at your universities probably more than 20. And that gets really, really difficult. And sometimes I can challenge myself just by, I'll just switch up what cameras and lenses I'm bringing, right? Like I used to always be 24 to 70 and a 70 to 200 when I was off the field. And lately I've been 35-1.8 and 85-1.8. And I've been photographing a lot of, documenting a lot of what's been going on socially, or I'm sorry, in American society in the last month or two. And I challenge myself. Like one day I'd be like, okay, I'm just taking the 14 to 30, or I'm just taking the 35. If it was good enough for the photographers of the past to just work with a manual focus Leica in a 28, then I can certainly do this. Like I've already doubled my odds. Like I have 2 cameras and 2 lenses. So changing that up all the time really affects kind of how I look at it. So we play a lot of basketball at the Seahawks. We're obsessed by basketball. Our head coach is not afraid to throw a snowball, and our players are not afraid to throw snowballs back.
I want to throw in a quick comment, Rod, about your work that you've been doing socially. Sorry for interrupting, but I think it needs to be get out there. Everybody needs to go to rodmarphoto.com on Instagram, and you need to see the work he's been doing, because it's some really good work. And don't just stop there. You got to read it. Some of his comments and the interaction that he's having with the community has a lot of power that is telling of the time that we're in right now. So you got to go there. You got to check it out and give him a follow.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll show you some of those photos in a bit. So this was, we're talking about having fun and players posing. This was after the NFC Championship game, and our players, everybody wanted a group position photo, and this was the defensive linemen, and they were like, hey, take a photo. And then for some reason, they all started taking off their shirts, and, you know, I mean, these are big, powerful men, but defensive linemen aren't known for having the best bodies on a football team. So they did this, and then they had it blown up to like 4 by 6 feet and put in their meeting room. And our video guys were in there one day, and they were laughing at this photo, and they said, hey, you know, we're going to recreate this photo. And so the video team did their own version of that photo and enlarged it, replaced it over the other photo in the defensive meeting room. So this was, you know, there's a lot of fun to be had. And yeah, we're not going to look at that photo for very long. I'm going to barf. All right, questions? All right, I'm going to spin. Go ahead.
Sorry, there were a couple of questions about concerning process. Do you use any photo delivery system like INFLCR? I don't know what that is personally. How do you get photos to the players? How do you upload photos to servers, computers in game? Do you still use card runners in a game? I think that was already answered. And another question about remote transmission. I mean, the Wi-Fi transmission straight from camera. Can you talk about some of the processing?
Absolutely. So we use Photo Shelter and Libris, and I think you guys have a speaker coming from them that it's amazing for us as an organization. If you're not using a system like Libris, which is Photo Shelter's multi-user, it's great because I can upload photos into galleries and collections and set permissions for all of them. So like our dance team photos, like only the choreographer and the director can see those photos, but action photos, we don't put anything into our online archive on Photo Shelter and Libris that we do not feel is ready to be published. So there are no raw photos. Everything's been cropped, post-processed, color corrected, and is ready to go. And it gives you the option. It gives our clients within the building, and when I say clients, I mean someone who works in ticketing or marketing who needs a photo, like, oh, I need this photo. They can download it in different sizes. And then we keep a separate archive of all the RAWs. And so everything we're doing online, I use the camera. It's an Ethernet port out to a mini router, which is attached to the bottom of my camera, which is spitting a signal to a MiFi that I carry in my pocket. And that is programmed to send the photos straight to Photo Shelter. So, and I had a picture of it somewhere. I'll see if I can find it. But anyway, it's a little white mini router. I think Camlink makes one similar. And then Ethernet cord out. And then that router, this mini router on the bottom of my camera is spitting to a MiFi. Does that make sense? And so now with the latest cameras I've shot the D6, I don't have one in my hands, but I assume that some of those protocols will probably change, and things are getting easier and easier to do that way. Did that answer that question? Give me a thumbs up, Jay. All right, cool.
One last quick question in terms of
sure.
Image rights. Do you own the rights to your images?
I do not. The Seahawks own the rights to my images. I can use them for my personal use and social. That really hasn't come up for me because the NFL is so licensed. I know that there's always been a push that you should always own your images because you can do so much more with them. In pro sports, I actually feel like it's not a big advantage for me to own my images because even to license them, they'd have to get permission for all the marks. So for example, I once or twice a month, I get a letter or a pitch from someone doing a book about the Seahawks, and they want to use an image. And I refer those to the legal department, and the marks have to be approved, and there are contracts between the league and the players associations and the sponsors for all of these things. So even if I could license those images, by the time my piece of the pie would come back, it would be pretty small. And it's one of the things that, I've exchanged in my retainer. is those rights. And most teams are not going to give you the rights, and especially because there was a recent fight between the Green Bay Packers and their photographers about rights. And so the teams, and I'm sure most of you that freelance outside of your universities understand that the clients want the rights now. And so your recourse to that is hopefully finding ways to increase your fees and rates. All right, so I'm going to spin through kind of some tips that I want to share with you guys. If you don't shoot a lot of sports, we think about sports photography like this, these kind of peak action moments. And so I'm always trying to find peak action. So I want the ball ideally outside of the receiver's hands because it feels more anticipatory than if he's already caught it. And then sometimes I get lucky and it's like literally one fingertip. So I'm always looking for these moments, and I'm hitting that shutter hard. And even though I'm using a motor drive, it's usually the first frame, right? This is the first frame. This is the first frame of this series. This is the first frame. Like I'm timing it to when that ball's coming down. I'm obviously not always successful. I'm showing you guys 5 photos out of tens of thousands where that ball is just about to come in. And a famous philosopher, I think it might have been Bill and Ted, said for every action, there is a reaction. You know, we don't chimp, right? Like everyone knows what chimping is. It's looking at the back of your camera to see if you've got it. I've talked to a number of technical experts in the field, and they have assured me that once I've snapped the shutter, the photo doesn't change. It's not going to get magically better by me looking at it. Okay, so if I've shot the picture, it's already recorded in the disk. No matter how many times I look at it, it's not going to get sharper. Like if I've blown focus, I've blown focus. So no use looking at the back of your camera because you're going to miss these moments. Okay, you're going to miss these moments, the reaction moments. And the reaction moments are often more telling or as telling as the action moments. This is Jadeveon Clowney recovers a fumble for a touchdown. And the interesting thing about this photo is you can tell by the background that we're in Arizona, but look how many Seahawks fans are in that end zone. So telling stories, looking for reaction. And this was a thing that kind of took over the NFL in the last couple of years, the group photo after a touchdown or after an interception or something like that, where they all come running over to find you. And it was really cool, like for the first couple games, like, oh yeah. But and someone asked the question earlier, like your rapport with the players and do they know you? And like, yeah, they know me, they know to seek me out. In fact, in San Francisco, we had an interception for a touchdown. The players ran to the end zone, and there was another Asian photographer in the end zone, maybe 20 feet from me with short hair. And they started to run over to him. And then one of the players recognized that it wasn't me. In the middle of them starting to pose, he looks at the guy and then he finds me and points, and they all come 20 yards over and run and pose for me. And that was really funny. And afterwards, like they all remembered it, like, man, that dude looked just like you. But they want me to shoot that photo. Why? Because then they can get it. So I'm always trying to tell a story, right? I learned that from Harley. Like your photos have to tell stories. So I use backgrounds to tell stories all the time. This is DK Metcalf, like walking into the stadium. So I'm always trying to tell these stories, little moments. Again, Pete Carroll, like this is one frame through the door, and I've already measured it, metered it before I've even knelt down to shoot the photo. I don't want to disturb him. This is a picture I like because I've always wanted to shoot this picture during a game, but they don't let me on the field between the hash marks into the huddle. All right, backgrounds, right? Like we all be aware of our backgrounds. I tell people when they ask me all the time, like, what's the difference between a professional photographer and an amateur photographer? I said, one, I'm going to shoot 3,000 photos for every 100 you shoot. And the other thing is I'm going to be looking at my backgrounds because I already know what the foreground is. right? So I'm always looking for clean backgrounds or storytelling backgrounds. And this is photo from early in my career, which is like, this is kind of the gold standard of bad backgrounds, right? Like I'm using flash because it's back in the days of film. My flash has hit a metallic sign. I've got a porta potty in the back. Like it's just, I love this photo. It's just all bad. The only thing it's missing is like a white van. Like if this picture had a white van, like it would be perfect. I love this photo, the action, the lines of the arms and the legs. And then dude upper left, right? That's all you see. That's all you see now when you look at that photo. Like not only does he look bored and like this is not exciting, but he's wearing a white shirt. Could you wear a blue shirt, dude? Backgrounds. When Dallas' stadium first opened, the walls were kind of Sam's Club, Walmart, Costco beige, and the backgrounds were terrible. And then sometimes you get the guy in the dad jeans, you know, in the background. So you're always trying to find cleaner backgrounds. And that's the thing when we're working for our clients and you guys at universities, you know where the backgrounds are, right? So work the backgrounds because you already know where the backgrounds are.
Rod, do you spend a lot of time in post for those photos that are a good moment, but they got a crappy background?
No, I try and not shoot crappy backgrounds. And if it's a decent photo, like I really have to weigh how much do I like this photo versus me having to look at the crappy background because it really offends me. And in post, I can help crappy backgrounds by cropping, but like I'll never substitute anything like Photoshop things. Like I don't do any of that. I don't do cloning. And I don't really have time after a game to do any of it. Like I've got to whittle through 3,500 photos, edit, you know, tag them down to selects, drag them into Lightroom, let those previews grow, then do the post-processing, the cropping and keywording, and then exporting all within probably the 1 hour we have between when a game ends and when we depart the locker room. So the other thing I'm big on, in baseball, we talk about mixing up your pitches, right? If you throw fastballs all day, hitters are going to time it and hit it out of the park, which is why they invented the curveball, which arcs as it comes towards the plate. A fastball goes relatively straight. A curveball arcs, and a changeup is 20% slower and keeps the hitter off balance. So I want to keep my viewers off balance by mixing up my pitches, by really kind of looking and seeing the entire picture. And a lot of times that's taking my eye away from the camera and really seeing kind of what's out there. And then occasionally, like we got new lights on the top of the stadium. So I'm shooting a nighttime aerial. I'm trying to go wide as much as I can because so much of what I do is telephoto. And I think that causes viewer fatigue. So this is a remote. You can see me taking the picture and I'm wearing a white shirt, ruining my own background, kneeling lower right. I'm wearing a white shirt because that's our team shirt for that day. So this is a remote. I'm taking this picture from 2 different angles. This is underneath a huddle. This helps when you're my size. Although sometimes if I'm shooting outside of the huddle, one of the players will and you know, you talk about the rapport with players. Sometimes they're bumping me, sometimes they're hitting me, sometimes they're lifting me up like in Lion King, you know, or they're just pressing the shutter button. You know, this was a boring photo of laundry. I made it better by getting into the dryer, popping a little flash. So mixing up my pictures, finding different ways to show things and see the entire field, right? As quarterbacks, if we lock into a receiver, we're going to get intercepted. So I'm always trying to take my camera away, show different things, find interesting light. This was the last flight of, I believe this was a 747. Yeah, it's a 747 and employees had signed the engine and we were on the last flight of the 747. This is after the team's owner, Paul Allen, had passed away. So I'm always looking to tell different stories. And then I'm looking for details, right? Because each picture is like this, we can use a lot of different things. We can use this photo for a lot of different things. It doesn't have a player's image, but it has our logo. There's lots of different ways. And then sometimes, you know, you're just looking for the little storytelling moments and even the sky cam gets wet. This is that sideline photo we talked about. This is from behind. I know they are so engaged, they don't really register me being there. And so I'm free to take that photo. If you're a Mariners fan at all, you know that they've never won the World Series. This was for a story, I believe, for ESPN. I don't know why they're wearing pumpkins. Forgot I was going to show you a topless photo. And just weird things are always happening. So you always kind of always have a camera on you and always kind of be looking for those moments because you never know when they're going to happen. All right. I've shown you a bunch of like my best work, but crap happens. The ref's going to get in your way. You're going to shoot with another camera brand and it's not going to lock focus. This was back when I was shooting not Nikon. You're going to shoot a sport that you have no idea how to shoot and you're going to come up with crap like this. Or a player is going to have, oh, my camera's not working. Jay, can you talk to me?
Yeah, just the presentation's still working, but your camera's not working. We don't necessarily need to see your beautiful face, but just wanted to let you know.
Okay. All right. Is there a question? Do you have a question for me right now? Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking. There was one that was asking about, do you photograph situations that are newsworthy but might be considered controversial or bad PR from the team's perspective? Thinking of situations like kneeling protest or player injuries. Do you go ahead and shoot those and not publish them, or what's the process?
I'm always documenting, yeah. Shoot first, ask questions later, right? I do shoot our injuries, not that we'll ever publish them, but you never know. A player might make a remarkable recovery and we'll want the pictures to tell that story, but also we document our medical staff and our training staff. So I do all that. And yeah, I've photographed players kneeling, and a lot of it is, it's my job to shoot the picture, but it's not my job to decide whether or not it gets published, right? We have a social team, we have a PR team, like those decisions kind of go above me. So getting back to this photo, yeah, like player, right? 3 interceptions, they beat the Eagles on the road, and then somebody's camera strap flies in my camera. I've got an audio pole in the back. It's just, again, it's just bad. And then sometimes you're just gonna miss, right? Like this is the most famous photo in Seahawks history, and I did not take it. I was on the other end of the field. This is Richard Sherman knocking a ball away from Michael Crabtree to seal a Super Bowl berth. And this is the most famous picture in Seahawks history, and I did not take it. And sometimes that's just gonna happen. And sometimes you're gonna get the fumble recovery, and then here, he's running in front of me. I've managed to switch to my wide angle, but you can't see this really maybe on your screens, but this photo's blurry, and it's just movement. I've gone from this, which was the 180 to 400, to this, which I'm grabbing the wide angle, and I'm mad because it's a nice moment, but it's soft and it's blurry. And I think it's soft just from motion, because I've looked at this a million times and I can't really find the point of focus, but literally I just blew the photo, right? But I regained it by the time he got to the end zone. I do a lot of portraits, and I've done portraits throughout my career, and I put these portraits in there, and as I was okay, this photo is my friend Jim Capel, who was writing for ESPN, and he was doing a story about a sports writer recreating the iconic photos in history. So this is Michael Phelps with his 8 gold medals, but a sports reporter would not have 8 gold medals. He would have 8 chocolate donuts. And I'm not going to show you, and you can thank me now, the nude of my friend Jim on the bike, like Lance Armstrong once posed on the bike nude. It hasn't show you guys, his portrait work is so good, you know, and this is me just kind of throwing some portraits up. This is Casey Kane. I do a lot of portraits, but my portraits have to be so quick I get 5 minutes with somebody to do these portraits. This portrait, Marshawn Lynch didn't want to do the photo with the Skittles, and it was kind of a corporate thing, and they were making him to do it. And this, again, is where the rapport with the player helps, because I talked to him, and he was like, I don't want to do this, Chief. And I'm like, well, you know, they kind of want you to, but, you know, tell you what. I go, give me like 3 frames. And he goes, really, that's it? I go, you be out of here in 4 minutes. And so we did a photo of him holding the bowl of Skittles, and he wasn't happy, and the photo wasn't working. And I was like, you know what? You can throw the bowl of Skittles. And so he goes, I could really throw the bowl of Skittles. I'm like, okay, on the 3rd frame, you can throw the bowl of Skittles. On the 2nd frame, you can throw a handful. So he threw a handful here. And then on the last one, he literally took a salad bowl full of Skittles and threw them all over our production room for the photo. But we got this, and it worked. This is Megan Rapinoe. This is for a story on Major League Baseball pitcher Trevor Bauer and how he uses high-tech methods for training. This is a picture I think a lot of you guys would appreciate, because I think you have to, this is something that some of you might get called to do, right? Like the little neighborhood school district called me and said, we'd really like to do a photo during the big rivalry game between Shorecrest and Shorewood. I'm like, cool, I'll do that. And they're like, can you shoot all of the stands? We want all of the people in the photo. And I'm like, you're not going to get the teams in it if we do it at halftime. They're like, okay, fine, we'll do it without the teams. But these are all the fans and the marching bands and the cheerleaders through the big rivalry game in the Shoreline District. And so we've lit an entire high school site of a high school stadium. So multiple lights, and we have to do this at halftime. We get like maybe 8 frames off before we're done. They create this and they sell it for charity. And then again, this is Russell Wilson for Sports Illustrated. He knows exactly what the look is. I've showed it to him. I've talked to him. He kind of knows what we're doing. It's a quick shoot. And then someday someone calls you and says, can you shoot Michael Bennett as a Jedi? And finding a Jedi uniform for someone who's 6'5", 290, not the easiest. So, questions. How can I answer questions?
There's a few comments in here, like multiple people saying, see, he is one of us. That came from Glenn Carpenter. And Glenn also is asking, did you know Bobby Matrich, the pitcher? Can you talk more about the light you used for that last group photo?
Oh yeah, the one at the stadium. That's 4 Profoto B1s with magnums. And so the great thing about using the Profotos with the Air Remote now is I can dial it in from on top of the lift. I'm on top of a lift. And so we've aimed those at different points. I've gone 2 days before and done the lighting with an assistant. So, and we've put tape down on the track, so when we show up, we know where the lights go, and we know where they're aimed, and we know what the power is. And so everything is quick. And if something's overexposed, then I can dial it down from my remote. So I want to share with you some of these are just with COVID and pandemic. I wanted to go back to the VMAC, the Virginia Mason Athletic Center, which is our training, the Seahawks home, and kind of take pictures so that we would be able to remember and kind of document what it was like during the time of pandemic. So these are all just, we toned them to black and white. It's just no one's in a place that would be a buzzing beehive of activity. And I know this is something that's going on in all of your universities too. So if you get the chance to kind of document it, they might not use the photos now, but 20 years from now, everyone's going to remember that one year where there was no one could come to work and there was no football and the halls were empty and everything had to be cleaned multiple times. So I went and I just kind of did this. They really weren't sure why I wanted to do it until they saw the photos and they're like, oh, okay, like we got, yes, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, these are going to be photos that are valuable because it was such a different time. Do I have a photo of my setup? I'm not sure if I do. I can see if I do.
While you're looking, Steve Roberts, who asked about seeing your setup, he also wants to know, on game day, do you and your social media or your social media give you a shot list, and how extensive is it? And also, does your wireless setup work better than a WT6?
I don't have a WT6. We developed this wireless system 5 or 6 years ago, and so that's what I've been using. So I can't really speak to that. What was the other question?
The other question is about shot lists. Do you guys generate?
Oh yeah, we do. Yeah, we do get a shot list, and we also have what we call guest photographers who help get those shot lists. My job on game day is really to document the football team. So most of everything I'm doing is all football. Questions?
Very cool.
I'm looking for that photo. Don't know if I have it.
Not seeing any other questions right now.
Okay, so go ahead.
No,
I have another 10 minutes. Can I have 10 minutes?
We're at 90 minutes now. Our drop dead stop time is at 1/4 till.
All right. Well, I don't want to, step on Deanne's toes, because what I wanted to show you guys was.
Glenn has given us a 7-minute mark, I think is what he's saying.
Okay, cool. So one of the things I've been doing lately, and we're talking about, I want to go back to what I talked about at the beginning, which is moments, right? Like this is all about moments. And I'm trying to not only find moments when I'm doing football, but I'm also trying to document what's going on in the world right now. And so I've documented my city in COVID. And so, because, these are important times. We can see this photo. Give me a thumbs up. Okay. So, I've walked around my city documenting COVID because it's such an unusual time. And so, especially when a lot of us aren't working, the campuses are closed or whatever, like, how do we stay fresh? And what I'm trying to do is document this moment in time. This is the line at Costco, socially distanced, back before things started to open up. Pike Place Market, which is normally a beehive of activity. A restaurant selling toilet paper for $1 on the side of the street. Things that you would really we've never really seen. School is closed and through maybe September. And finding ways to just use my camera, not only to document it, but also to stay fresh, right? For me to be able to stay fresh and to be out there and working. And I feel like this is some of the most important work that I'm doing between the COVID and then the protests that have been going on for Black Lives Matter. And I've been on the streets a lot shooting this, and I feel like the media has, and I worked for the media for 20 years, like they love protest porn, they like tear gas, and they like flames and guns and things. But 90% of the protesters are well-intentioned and they're genuine about what they're doing. And I've tried to really use my camera to represent what I feel like is truly going on in the streets of Seattle.
So August Miller has a question for you. First comment. One thing a lot of sports photographers as well as non-sports photographers worry about is that the image must be totally tack sharp. The question is, how important is that really when the historical nature or content is so strong that being tack sharp is not as important? And also, do you use slower shutter speeds to show motion or tell the story?
I do use, I'm going to go back out of my screen share. Lost my cursor. Anyway, I would say, look, here's my answer to that. One of the most famous photos in history is Robert Capa's photo, right? Of the soldier getting shot. Like, that's blurry. Bill Appridge's photo of RFK's assassination is 4 stops underexposed. It doesn't have to be technically perfect. And maybe there will be a moment in Seahawks history that I feel like is so important that I will have maybe blown focus and it's blurry or has motion blur or whatever. But, you know, I mean, let's be realistic. I'm shooting sports. Like, sports is for play. And there's been really no moment that I felt like is so compellingly important that I've missed it, and would need to still produce a photo that might be under or blurry. And yes, I do use slow shutter speeds all the time. Drives my editor crazy.
All right, Jake, that was a great response. There's a couple more questions there. If you have chat open, do you want me to read it or you want to go for it?
I can see it. Let's see. What about my job makes me nervous? Oh my God. You know what makes me nervous? Like, getting in the way. I swear to God, there were 3 weeks in a row, 3 road games in a row where I was trying to get to where I needed to go in the locker room, and Pete Carroll came around the corner and we were like face to face. And it was so awkward. Like, I spent my entire career getting out of the way, and 3 games in a row, he has almost run me over. And so, yes, that makes me nervous, getting in the way. I don't get nervous about missing photos anymore. I really try and be present and in the moment. I shot the Super Bowl in 2005, and I made the moment too big, and I was nervous, and I didn't get good pictures. And before the Super Bowl in 2013, I remember one of our coaches telling his players, like, don't give 110% today, give 100%. Like, you know what you're doing, you're a pro, trust what you do, trust your teammates to do their job. If you do what you already know how to do, you're going to be fine. And I've adopted that, and I've been able to be much more present in my work. I'm not thinking about what it's going to look like. I'm just worried about capturing what's in front of me. And so I don't get nervous about big moments anymore. Favorite location to shoot. I like the end zones because I can kind of see everything, but I need to mix it up. I talked about mixing up pitches. So I will go to the sidelines a lot and shoot really long and tight. So like, I'll shoot a 600 at the line of scrimmage, especially early in a game, just trying to capture something that's different. I'm always trying to be different. Let's see, do I get pre-shoot jitters? Kind of address that. Has there been much hostility from police or protesters? Yeah, sometimes, you know, people don't want you to take their photos, but they also just leave if they see you with the camera. The police have not told me not to take a photo, and most of the protesters, you can tell if you look at my Instagram and the photos that I've taken, most of my subjects know that I'm taking a photo, and a lot of times I'll just point at my camera and be like, is this okay? Because I don't want to, you know, create a scene. I don't want to become the story. So, and nothing's really happened yet that is that important. In terms of, like, it's all important, don't get me wrong. There hasn't been a moment that I felt like I can't pass up yet. Do I listen to a radio broadcast of the game while shooting? I used to, I don't anymore, because now I feel like I know enough kind of about what I'm doing. Questions?
I was going to mention on the protesters, if you look at his Instagram, there was a great exchange between he and one of his viewers who was calling him out for photographing the protesters. And Rod was really calm about that and just let him know, hey, these people knew I was there and I'd already sort of made that gesture to the camera. They were okay with it. And I thought the way you handled that was great.
Yeah, it was, can you guys see this photo? Okay, so yeah, it was this photo, and someone said, don't show the protesters' faces because police are doing retribution on protesters. And I was there that night, and these guys had slowly, carefully backed their van up to within 50 feet of the police line and stood on the roof of the van and had a sound system, and were in full view of the police floodlights. You can see how he's lit. And so I just explained that. And I said, these guys were aware they were being photographed. They know they're being photographed by police. They were photographed, videotaped. Their license plate was taken down, like all of the things. And a lot of that's just my experience over 20 years, having covered WTO riots, having covered Rodney King, having covered riots in different cities, kind of that experience and kind of knowing when and where those things need to be. I really enjoyed this. Oh, can I enlarge that? Was it small?
Yeah, you were still in the group, the proof sheet.
Oh,
mode.
It's not showing you the. Oh, I thought. Okay, we'll go to that.
So we're right at that
like
point.
3 minutes. I know, I got it. I'm watching my time. I'm going to show you this photo. I like that one a lot. I'm going to show you this last photo. Go ahead, Jay.
While you're pulling that up, Andrew Tucker has a question. I like what you said about getting something different. I often try to go somewhere in the stadium different to find something else or from a different perspective. Do you feel that you can leave the everyday action shooting from the sidelines to risk getting something different?
Yeah, I do that a lot. I do that a lot more now. Maybe not in like the last quarter of a tight game, but there's nothing that's really going to happen in the second quarter that, that if I miss it, it's not going to be like the end of the world. Can you guys see that photo now?
Not seeing it.
All right. Well, screen share has stopped working. So, all right. You can see it on my Instagram.
There you go. At rodmarphoto.com or rodmarphoto.
That's right. Yes, I miss shooting basketball. Is there another city I would want to move to and explore work? Maui? Maui would be good. Fiji would be good. There are a lot of pro sports in Maui and Fiji. I would like that. I want to thank all of you guys for your time and attention today. It's been really cool for me to be able to do this. I loved meeting so many of you last year at Roberts. It's a really not only special group that you guys have, it's a really talented group that you guys have. And again, thanks to you guys and thanks to Roberts and for having me. Really grateful for this opportunity.
Thanks, Rod. You've been awesome. All right, now back to some business. Thanks for Rod for doing that, and thanks Roberts Camera for sponsoring Rod and for helping him be able to make it here to give his presentation for us. Now we have some gifts to give, or some door prizes to give away. So real quick, let me click through here. The first thing is from Think Tank, Photocross 13 bag, and the winner is, drum roll. So the bag goes to Catherine Sagers. The next drawing is the BYU Truffles and a BYU t-shirt, and that goes to Chris Gannon. And those are our prizes. So thanks for joining us for the morning session of UPAA 2020 Digital Symposium. We'll be back in just a few minutes with Deanne to see what she has to share with us.